Okay, we're in this episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff to have a really cool review for you guys from the brand Vaer. A little about them. They're founded back in 2016 out of Venice, California, which is in Los Angeles County in the good old US of A. And they pretty much started the brand because they couldn't afford the watches they liked, and they didn't like any of the watches that they could afford. So they used their life savings to bring their vision of the perfect everyday watch to life. And they've even been so successful to proudly offer American assembly as well as testing options. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key characteristics design. When you're looking for a diver, of course, you're going to want water resistance, simply with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. This is their D5 Pacific, and it's in the Malibu colorway, and this is one of their USA assembled automatic watches in the 39mm size, and it's pretty much their vision of the perfect everyday diver, simultaneously rugged and refined with USA assembly. And this colorway is inspired by the flashy, star-studded bright beach city of Malibu. You can get this for $749 on this premium bracelet, as you guys can see featured here. Now, I don't know how this watch hasn't been more popular. Honestly, I see a lot of ads as well as reviews for the Vaer brand, and I've reviewed a couple of watches over the years, and honestly, this colorway stood out so much. I was just really surprised that some of the other publications hadn't really latched onto this. Like, this for me is like such a really well-timed and well thought out kind of spring. Like, this might be the perfect spring dive watch. Like, it's just with the pastels, the color play, that kind of Malibu beach town vibe. I think it all really, really hits. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, yes, this is definitely post Barbenheimer. I mean, if there ever was a watch to wear to watch a Barbie movie, this would probably be it as well. I think the pink is, just that nice bright shade, and then of course the bluish green tones that play off of it are just immaculate. I love the teal vibes there. It just kind of, again, I'm just really surprised that this didn't become like a darling within the review space just because of the colorway and the execution. When you get into some of the details here, guys, they done some really cool stuff. Look at that, like kind of sandwich multi-layer dial. I mean, you didn't even have to do that just because the colorway is so good, but the fact that they did, I don't know, there's just something that, it resonates with me for sure. So 39mm in diameter, 13.7mm thick, but I will say it does wear that thickness quite well. And honestly, 14mm isn't bad for a dive watch, but you're going to see some that are going to wear that weight better than others. And this at 13.7, again, I think it's actually quite slim and trim, and it even wears its heft quite slim and trim thanks to this nice kind of compartmentalized mid case with nice undercuts, and then of course well-defined kind of break within the lines to do this beautiful, finely done coin edge bezel. Check that out. And then, of course, coming up to that double dome sapphire, which flows really nicely there. And you can see stays quite legible even at harsh angles, thanks to the fact that it's domed not just on the outside, but also on the underside, which is, how you get something that's double domed. The lug to lug, another winner in terms of the numbers here, guys, 45.9, so just under 46mm lug to lug. So this is going to fit a number of wrists very, very well. Full 316L stainless steel, brushed with some beautiful high polished bevels. Definitely has that kind of Omega-esque case there, but really it's just kind of the bevels and those lugs, the way that they turn. But when you look at it at other angles, you can see this undercut. They've done a lot to differentiate, especially even the crown. It's not the crown, but the bezel coin edge there as well. Again, they've just done things to kind of tweak it, and they've taken what was a pretty basic layout and I like that over each iteration, they kind of add more and more details to really differentiate it across some of the other watches, that it's competing against. And at $749, it's not cheap. But again, also, it's not being assembled in China either. So I don't know. I think there is a bit of a trade-off value there. Of course, I'm located in the US, so I can appreciate anything that's going to support any level of US production, watchmaking, or anything like that. Now, the bezel does have a 100. Ooh, very nice. Ooh, really well balanced. 120 click bezel, guys. Smooth, but still is tactile and quite audible on that click. There might be just a hair of like, I can rock it, but then it clicks. So feels really well put together. No like lateral, no up and down play, anything like that. Just there's just the click and then the click that it's supposed to be on. So very nice, lines up and aligns really well. And you guys can see, you can really test the alignment thanks to the fact that their chapter ring also is quite well done. And, in terms of, there's a lot of busyness and a lot of colors, it's still quite legible thanks to the style of, the high contrast layout that they decided to execute here. The crown is screw down and it is nicely signed. Check that out. So very clean. And then inside, although you can't, you can see it. Yes, surprise. It does have a display case back. Check that out. Very nice. And you know what? You don't always see that. I mean, I know some people would want maximum thinness here, but with that thin movement, maybe you could have inset this a little bit more. But I'm going to say that it probably wouldn't have made a difference. And it's nice to see that moving around, especially since you do have that Miyota movement, right? Which does have some decent, out of the box. It's going to have some decent decoration on it there. And it just helps you feel like, this thing is alive and it's reliant on your motion and your movement. So inside you have the Miyota 9015, which has a 40-hour power reserve, beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour. And they do have these accurate to -5 to +10 seconds per day, which is great because a lot of brands will just use the factory settings and tolerances and just kind of leave them at that. And, here it's going to be tuned a little bit tighter, which I think is nice. So it is nice to have that also on the display back, nicely signed rotor. And then we get into really the star of the show here, which is going to be this dial, which has a matte stepped layout with applied indices, framed date there, which is nice at 6 o'clock. And the date actually changes colors. So something that, let's go ahead and pop the crown here. So you can see not a standard roulette, but boom. Hey, look at that. That's pretty cool. I dig that they did, every few, it can just kind of be a little random. If there was a code to the way that they designed this date wheel, let me know. I don't know the secret behind it. But yeah, it's goes every few, then boom, then boom. So very, very cool. I dig that a lot. We'll just leave it at 6 here. And of course, depending on the angle, some of you might be worried about how well that's centered. Again, a lot of it has to do with the angle, especially when this dial is quite layered and deep. It's mostly going to be kind of, you can see, well centered. It's going to be more so a game of shadows that are going to make it seem like, okay, it's a little offset, right? Weird, the offset on this side and this side, but then you look at it straight on and you try to get the light on it and you realize that it's actually pretty nicely centered. So no worries from that front. And I will say, over the years, the different Vaers that I've reviewed, they'll have their issues here and there, and I have to say this is the best one yet. So it's nice to see that they're, with each iteration, they're improving their quality, whether it be their QC or QA. It's definitely, you're getting that USA touch to it, and you're feeling like, hey, there was a little extra USA touch, right? There's a little bit more attention to detail there, so I dig that. Also, something to note here is those hands are nicely painted, nice and high contrast. Also, the Lume, guys, Super Luminova BGW9 and 20 layers of it, so this thing is going to really be quite crisp in the dark. 20 atmospheres or 200 meters of water resistance, 20 millimeter lugs here, guys. You're getting this premium 3-link bracelet. It does have a male end link, but I will say that protruding finger is nicely sloped down, so it's not really going to add a lot of length in terms of the footprint. And you guys already know this was a pretty manageable footprint at just under 46 millimeters lug to lug in terms of the case. So yeah, again, not an issue. And if anything, there's people that do like that aesthetic, and there's a reason why the male end link came into popularity in the first place, right? Like, it's a smooth transition. Now, getting into this bracelet, some cool features. You're going to get that nice taper there, tapering down to 16 millimeters at this 18.2 millimeter Node X proprietary clasp. Guys, sure you've seen this clasp before if you're a fan of the channel. And it's from Notice. And it's really cool that they're, licensing this out for other folks to use in terms of getting that on the fly. A little bit of relief there, guys. The links are relatively short in terms of getting everything sized correctly off the bat, but if you do have your wrist swell a little bit, it is nice to have a little bit of relief, right? And of course, it would be nice if the relief, maybe if the clasp was just a hair longer and you'd have less of kind of that relief showing. But I will say, in reality, in practice, you're not going to be worried about it. You're just going to be happy that your expanding wrist is going to have a little bit more room to breathe. But I definitely would recommend getting it sized correctly with the extension pushed all the way in. And then if you have to use it for a level of micro adjust, then you can. If you have it just one click, then that's not too bad. 2 clicks, and then it's really just that final click where you're going to be getting that it's where it's going to be a little bit more evident there that there is an extender. So again, not the most elegant, but also not the most expensive. So I do dig that, and I think it is a very intuitive and clever clasp. And look at the way everything aligns and everything stays nice and slim and trim. With that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, check that out. I think that looks great. Look at that nice taper there. Fits great, flows really well, doesn't have an overly chunky clasp, overly complicated or anything like that. It just fits very well balanced. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens there, you're going to get some perspective distortion, and it's going to make the watch appear much larger. Kind of like when you see different wrist shots on Instagram, right? The closer you get, kind of the more enlarged it's going to look. But if you go ahead and rest your arm a little bit lower and keep your, your lens a little further away, and then maybe just get a little bit of a zoom, you guys can get kind of the best of both worlds, right? You're going to get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio in terms of the way this is going to sit on your own wrist. You guys can see that the bracelet does drape really beautifully, and this watch does stay very nicely centered on the wrist. Check that out. Very, very clean, great details there, guys. Nice fat bevels, really, really fantastic. A lot of great visual interest, and the nice thing is it's really balancing well. Of course, the nature of most divers, which is going to be kind of that contemporary mixed with the classic, and trying to find a balance that still feels quite fresh. And I think they did a great job. And even without this colorway, I mean, they could have gave it a bit more of a plain setup, which, even if they did something black with maybe just like the red checkerboard as being the really only color pop, I think, or orange, or blue with orange, that could be awesome. I think just the details wise, even without the kind of louder colorway, this thing would look really, really cool. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and have the lights here. Hey, check that out. So that Lume is pumping. Of course, on the dial, it's going to be pumping just a little bit more than that bezel insert, especially since it is have that sapphire crystal with the Lume underneath it there. There's only so thick you can apply it, you know, of course, without making the bezel thicker itself, but it is still very cleanly done. But one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath the overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. You guys can see this is just a really cool, well contrast, well thought out layout. Like, it is still quite good, even with the you guys can see the bezel there, right? Similar, you know, kind of pale blue tones, still quite legible, still quite readable, which I think that's surprisingly good there. So very, very cool. You guys can also see that, of course, as the light glides over that brushing on that bracelet, nice and uniform. So really well executed. No, it's not, you know, some type of Omega level hairline brushing or Grand Seiko level of, you know, Zaratsu polish, but it does the job. And also it's much cheaper, right? Under $1,000 at $749, under $750 if you think about it. Well, $1 under anyway. And I think it looks good. Look at that, a little bit of play even on that crystal, which you can barely see. Really, it's just going to be a couple of reflections here and there, but you do get a beautiful look at the dial and the depth. And yeah, I dig that. So let's go ahead and hit the lights here, get into some closing thoughts on the wrist. That classic 39mm diver proportions, which are great in terms of model variants. Definitely check the site for availability and options. In terms of comparable models, guys, Microbrand divers under $1,000. Now that competition is quite tough, but for those who like the aesthetics as well as can appreciate the you know, the attribute of having USA assembly, I think this is a really compelling package. So for me, guys, the bottom line is this is a fun, vibrant option that has a good amount of crossover appeal into different collecting demographics across casuals and enthusiast collectors, because I think it just has a certain quality about it. I like that it's timeless enough with some of its design cues that are quite classical, but also contemporary enough with some of its choices in terms of its execution and color blocking. So yeah, this is kind of the most complete feeling Vaer dive watch I've handled yet. So big ups to them. Appreciate them sending this piece in, of course, for me to share with you all on the channel. And let me know what you guys all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please would like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.